Major organizations from the World Bank, from ODIHR within the OSCE family, and from the leading NGO and a key partner that's cooperated with the OSCE, Transparency International. So we're going to be focusing now on the issue of external actors, so the importance of these organizations and how they can influence transition, incorporate integrity, and safeguard the public interest in terms of fighting corruption. And so we'll look at a broad range of tactics in terms of conditionality on financing, to expertise in the implementation of anti-corruption programs, and mobilizing international public opinion. I'm not going to dwell on this. They're going to tell you about innovative tools that their organizations use to deal with corruption and to prevent it. So with that, I'm going to first welcome our first speaker, Mr. Ravi Senderovich, who is the practice manager of governance and ECA West at the World Bank. And so we're going to hear again about how a leading multilateral international financial institution is working with the OSCE on corruption prevention. So, Mr. Senderovich, you are welcome to the floor, and I ask you humbly to the podium all the way over here to give you exercise. So, from here to there. Apparently, it's better for streaming. Yeah. 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 You can run dramatically to and from if you wish, but thank you so much. You have 12 minutes, and again, thank you for good time management.
Openness is very important, yeah, for the discussion we have today. And thank you for the round of applause, because you are giving me a credit. You applaud me before knowing what I was going to say. And for somebody working in a bank, that's very important. To get access to credit is very important. So thank you. Look, very challenging session for us. This is right after lunch. So most of your blood is going to your digestive system now. And you are not going to pay a lot of attention for a while. So let's see if we can do it. So it's going to be a challenging session, also challenging because of the topic we are discussing, which is how to reduce chances for corruption in the countries where we work. What's the level of energy in the room at this point? Let me check with you. Hi, do you feel energized? Raise your hand. Yeah, like 20%, okay? The others, okay. Let's do another test. Raise your hand if you are listening to me now. Yes. 50%. We are getting there. We are getting there. Very good. So, very much thank you for your attention. Thank you, the organizers, the President of the Parliament, the Vice President of the network. Very happy to be here in Cyprus. Look, let me start with a very short story, which is, you know NASA, right? This space agency in the US, they need to recruit an astronaut to go for a very special and dangerous mission outside our planet. So they are, as we do in our organization, you have 3 candidates, you interview the 3 candidates, and then in a transparent way, you select the astronaut. So the first astronaut to come, there is a panel interviewing the person, and they say, okay, look, this is a very dangerous mission. How much money would you like to receive for this mission, and what is that you are going to do with the money? So the person says, well, for this, truly, I need $1 million, and I will leave the money to my family, my kids, because maybe I don't come back. Fine. Second person comes and says, look, I think this is very dangerous. I need $2 million. They say, why $2 million? Well, $1 million is for my family. I may not come back. $1 million is for my country, because my country has given me everything. Fine. The third person comes and they say, so how much money do you want and what are you going to do with the money? He says, I want $3 million. He says, the first $1 million is for my family because I may not come back. The second $1 million is for you, so you can select me. And they say, and the third $1 million is for the first candidate to travel. So basically, what we see is that when you have corruption, there is a system in equilibrium. It's a system that works, that provides lots of benefits for many that compete in the system, but more or less everyone gets something out of that. It's a low-level equilibrium. Most of society don't participate or benefit from this, but the equilibrium is there. And this has, many speakers have said that today, an impact on trust, on public institutions, on democracy, and that is very dangerous for our society. So this has been discussed today. Let's move to basically 4 points I wanted to share with you. This session is about policies that can be implemented, designed and implemented for this. So 4 main points. The first one is that corruption is not the problem. Corruption is a symptom of a number of problems that exist in society. So unless we focus on the real problems, the underlying issues that produce corruption, we are going never to address corruption and reduce the chances for corruption. And if we are going to focus on the real issues, there are 3 types of policies that we want to support. This is what we do in our organizations, but most of you as well. And these have to do with transparency, these have to do with inclusion, and this has to do with accountability. So let me give you just a few examples of this. I know that my colleagues in the panel will also go in more depth into some of these policies specifically. Transparency. So we want to have better systems for transparency on public finances. We want to make sure that on the spending side, everyone knows about the budget process from the beginning, from budget formulation to execution and auditing of the budget, where the money goes, for what. There's lots of experience now on open procurement platforms, making sure that it's not just that we know what happens with the money, but on real time, we can resort to electronic means to reduce corruption. But another point that I think is very important for our countries is transparency on the revenue side, something that we call many times tax expenditures. Others call it exemptions. So you know that in our societies, not everyone is taxed in the same way. And even when you are taxed in the same way, many people don't end up paying taxes. So more transparency on that is an area of public finances. Public services, transparency on public services is extremely important as well. Asset declaration, I know that we'll be discussing this today. Financing of political campaigns. That's something that is extremely important to reduce corruption, not just because you want to know where the money is going, but because when there is private financing of political campaigns, somebody is going to owe something to somebody who financed a campaign. And then the issue of civil service appointments, which is very important, who gets appointed for what, the civil service career, to make it more meritocratic. We've seen with COVID, I think that Anita, you referred to this today, the monitoring of expenditures, but also the monitoring of the provision of the vaccines, for example, and who got benefited by that. And then there is the transparency on the political system. I mentioned the asset declarations, the issue of the financing of political campaigns, and one point that I think is very important for all of us is the financing of the official communications of the government. You know that in most countries, governments have a line in the budget to finance public information campaigns. Well, it happens to be that they decide which of the different outlets of communication or media groups will receive more or less money. So having more transparency on the allocation of this is important, not just to save money, but to ensure the independence of journalism in the countries, or the media, which is extremely important. I think that this is important, transparency. Many times we, in a way, equate transparency with anti-corruption. Transparency is not enough. You can have lots of transparency. You have transparency without accountability. What you have is impunity, and people don't like impunity. Second point is about inclusion. And I think that this is very important. There's a number of policies that have been implemented across the world in terms of social accountability mechanisms. This is what citizens themselves can monitor the work of public institutions through, third-party monitoring of service provision, observatories of the budget. the connection of citizens with the supreme audit institutions. We've been talking about this, not just to identify wrongdoing, but also to make sure that whatever the supreme audit institution defines as a recommendation happens, so they can follow up to recommendations as well. They need to have recourse mechanisms, so when they see something, they have a way to promote government change, government response. It's not enough to identify wrongdoing. And access to information. Access to information laws is very important. I work on this in countries in the past, but there is a caveat that you need to pay attention to. You can have an access to information law that doesn't have an archives law connected to, so basically you give citizens the key to a room that may be empty. So it's not just to have access to information, you need to make sure that the information is there when citizens have access to the information as well. Very interesting that in the cases I know, some of the most frequent users of the right to information is not the citizens, is of course the media, the journalists, and the government officials themselves, that using the right to information law or the FOIA, we are able to get information that they cannot get from their own government where they work themselves. Attention here as well, participation without government response is going to lead to frustration and low trust in institutions. So you can have transparency without accountability, impunity, participation without response, that is frustration, low trust. So really what you need at the end is accountability. A number of policies that can be built for that. Strong public financial management systems, that's of course very important. To have a strong and independent judiciary system and the role of the prosecutors in the country, which also needs to be strong in terms of capacity, but also in terms of the independence. A strong and independent supreme audit institution with teeth, with the possibility of imposing sanctions when things don't go in the right direction, the need to tracking of illicit money flows, etc. Let me go to the last couple of points. One is the use of technology. It can be transformational. We've seen how much, especially among the young generation, the use of technology can actually change elections. It can change the future of a country, but the bad guys learn very quickly how to use technology as well. So one has to be paying attention to that part. I think that somebody coming from the US this morning was referring to the interference in elections, also through technology, right? So technology can work both ways. And this leads me to the next point, which is that we discussed a number of technical solutions in the morning, now the afternoon as well. I think that most of these solutions make sense. Do you agree that most of these solutions make sense? Do you agree? Yes. So why are they not implemented? You know? It's almost like saying, I know that I need to lose weight, I know to do more exercise and eat better, and I don't do it. Do I like to be fat? What is it, you know? So it's not implemented. So one can say that basically my sense is we have overemphasized the technical side of the solutions and underemphasized the political side of these solutions. When you are fighting corruption, it's not only about having the right legislation and the systems in place, it's about building the right coalitions that you need, the collective action, bringing the different parts of society together. Capacity is important, yes. Money, resources is important, yes, but you need the political will. Somebody referred to this in the morning as well, I think it was from Armenia. When you don't have political will, you are legislators in the room, what is that you do? You build it. But to build political will, for us as an international organization, you need to be working with different segments of society, not just with the public sector, also with citizens themselves. So to conclude, the idea is that there is a possibility, we've seen this happening in many countries, of building multi-actor platforms that put lots of attention not into doing more diagnostics or more plans, but monitoring the implementation of existing plans. To change the incentives, so those who need to implement things will see that somebody is watching, not just the supreme audit institution, society itself, the media itself. And this is not just important to empower citizens. I'm sure that, John, you will talk about empowering citizens. This is empowering people like you, empowering reformers in government, or in the public sector, or in the legislative, because when you want to bring about change, I am sure that you get lots of opposition and resistance. So in order to strengthen your position, you need to have that capacity of building this with others. So thank you for your attention. We are running out of time, but hopefully this will help us build more effective, inclusive, and accountable institutions in the countries we work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robbie, for beginning enthusiastically after lunch and sharing your insights. And again, I think key message is you can build platforms, but you have to build them in a way that they can really be used. So you don't want to design, as you said, a place where the house is empty. So appreciate your remarks. And with that, we'll now move to our next speaker, Constantine Vardez, who's the head of democratization unit of ODIHR, who will speak about their work with parliaments, and again, what kinds of essential tools are they recommending as part of the prescription. So Constantine, again, welcome to the podium for 12 minutes.
Thank you very much. Well, at this late time, I will not even try to repeat the test you did, the exercise, how many people will be listening and or following. So better to remain in illusion. So, but anyways, first of all, Madam President of the House of Representatives, President of the OCPA, ambassadors, Excellency Ambassador Domchowski, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to participate in this event, and a great honor to speak in front of such a distinguished audience. And thank you very much for the invitation, and particular thanks to Ms. Irene Ellermabridis for inviting me here, but also for very interesting talks and discussions we had back in Warsaw some time ago. And I'm looking forward to the future collaboration and discussions. In the beginning, let me just say a few words describing the institution which I have a pleasure and honor to represent. It's OSCE's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, which was established and is tasked by participating states to assist them in implementing what we call human dimension commitments to ensure the full respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms, promote and abide the principles of rule of law, and democracy, to build and strengthen democratic institutions. This function derives from the OSCE's comprehensive concept of security, which was already mentioned here: political, military, economic, environmental, and human dimension. This is the third dimension, and that provides the mandate for our institution to operate. It was also noted here earlier that OSCE participating states have agreed to this overreaching concept of security, also recognize that it cannot be achieved without the respect for human rights and functioning democratic institutions. And we meet today on the background of probably one of the most serious security and humanitarian crises in decades, the crisis which started with the military assault of the Russian Federation on Ukraine. This war, apart from bringing devastation and suffering to millions of civilians, also reminded us about the importance of the democratic institutions, importance of the checks and balances, rule of law, international human rights law, and so on and so forth, and the absence of which we see now severely can undermine security not only in the given country, but also in the entire region. Of all the demands that the gravity of the situation in Ukraine places on the international community, on each of us, one could argue that perhaps one of the most foundational is to continue to be diligent and steadfast in supporting the participating states to uphold the commitments they have made to one another and to themselves. Well, corruption, as UN former Secretary General once called it, is an insidious plague. It erodes institutions that should be effectively checked other, that are formed to fight it, but it leads to and it also leads to the human rights violations. And when corrupt bodies remain inefficient or turn a blind eye to such violations, this feeds to the culture of impunity and to even more severe violations. Corruption penetrates all layers of the society, affecting the entire body of the state, and indeed like a virus, it penetrates through and exploits also the weaker chains of the governmental structures. And therefore, the responses should be comprehensive, as it was mentioned in Maastricht document of 2003. Achieving good governance requires a comprehensive and long-term strategies approach so that success in one area are not undermined by weaknesses of another. Corruption cannot spread widely without the public institutions being involved in it, and therefore states should indeed try to develop the immune system which would effectively fight this virus. And in this respect, of course, national parliaments play a fundamental role in preventing and fighting the corruption, securing the public trust in efficiency, transparency, and accountability of the democratic process. Institutional corruption does not only impacts the space of the democratic reforms, but this also leads to the democratic backsliding in those states which had made some progress but are sliding back. Authorizes participating states in advancing public integrity and preventing political corruption, which at the end, as we mentioned a number of times here, serves the purpose of making our democracy stronger. And when identifying this, our programs and activities and policies, and choosing how to support and what to support, which key anti-corruption policies to support were guided by the OSCE commitments, by the norms of international law, and also the good examples across the region. I'll just mention a few. It's Copenhagen 1990, Istanbul 1999, Maastricht 2003, Sofia, Ministerial Council decision, Basel, and so on and so forth. So just to mention a few. In these documents, participating states have committed to develop efficient, accessible, accountable, and transparent public institutions, and that's what ODIHR is both mandated as and ready to support. And in order to achieve this objective, we of course work very closely with national authorities, national parliaments in the first place, and other national stakeholders, including civil society organizations, which and media, of course, which are instrumental in forming such political will, creating the demand for for politicians in order to respond effectively to the corruption challenges. And we're also working closely with OSCE's other institutions and structures, OSEA, and one of them, Parliamentary Assembly, of course, and the field operations, in which are engaged very actively and cooperate very actively with the state institutions. We also coordinate our efforts and cooperate with other international partners, such as GRECO and Venice Commission. In many cases, our efforts to promote adoption of code of ethics, we've noticed they were more successful when we spoke in the same voice with other international organizations, when institutions like GRECO, for instance, advise them to achieve implement relevant reforms, and we follow up with our assistance to helping them to actually achieve this objective. And our efforts in this respect were pretty substantial. We supported more than 15 OSCE national parliaments with the adoption and implementation of interim mechanisms, developing reform strategies, legislative procedures, and so on and so forth. We offer and established long-term partnerships as well with some of the independent oversight institutions, like anti-corruption agencies. At times, such cooperation starts with helping them to develop the legislative framework, which helps to establish the institution, and then it continues throughout the years by, for instance, helping to develop methodology for national corruption risk assessment, developing the methodology for risk assessment, or providing checklists of indicators to develop it. In this case, in this work, we not only advise participating states on good practices, international norms, but also benefit from learning from examples of others. And this is kind of a two-way street. when participating state can receive relevant expertise from ODIHR, free of charge, by the way, but also inform ODIHR and through ODIHR inform each other about the successful experiences and examples. In 2012, actually, ODIHR published first in its kind background study on professional and ethical standards for parliamentarians, analyzing how to build and reform systems that set professional and integrity standards for members of the parliament. And there's been a great focus since then on public integrity, and back then there were only few parliaments having the code of ethics in place. But since then, there was a bigger focus on this issue. And in February 2022, when we published a new edition, Parliamentary Integrity Resource for Reformers. Actually, I have one copy here with me, I think, which will stay here in Cyprus. But I'm happy also to provide you with the online link to the online edition. So in February, we already noticed that during this 10-year period, between these two publications, 20 parliaments adopted a code of ethics or code of conduct. And as a follow-up to this publication and to enhance its assistance efforts, ODIHR is now developing a toolkit on public integrity to offer parliaments easy tools to adopt new code of conduct or revise the existing ones. I think it is important to remember, and I think it was in Greco's recommendations as well, and as well as in many other, of some other international organizations' recommendations, that adopted code of conduct should be enforceable, easily accessible to the public, and complemented by practical measures for its implementation. And this is, I think, the most important. It can be more damaging to have code of conduct or anti-corruption related measures which are not enforceable or are ignored in practice, than not to have them at all. Having the legislation which nobody respects, it just ruins the trust into the state and trust into the rule of law. While not having such laws still leaves the hope that things may be improved in future. And bearing this in mind, ODIHR now offers not only support for the development of code of ethics, but also evaluate their effectiveness, assessing if and how we can make them to work better, whether there is MPs know the code, and whether they are able to apply it in practice. Earlier, I think it was mentioned that party regulations and party financing serve as a litmus test to evaluate the anti-corruption measures, and I fully agree with that. And this is why ODIHR collaborates with a wide range of actors and tries, and in this respect, focusing on issues like corruption and money in politics, when we jointly developed the guidelines together with the Venice Commission and also in consultation with Greco, and published the last edition in 2020, focusing on issues of party regulations and looking into the financing and the oversight mechanisms and so on. We also provide legal advice to the states on a variety of areas, and there have been almost more than 50 opinions, legal opinions we have produced, helping states to improve their legislation related to either anti-corruption, rule of law, judiciary, and so on and so forth. I see that I'm running out of time, so I will try to be briefer. And what we try to focus during our work are the issues which have been already mentioned, which I will not repeat, like conflict of interest, because the code of conduct they do not operate in vacuum, right? There is a legislative framework which needs to be to effectively address the issues such as conflict of interest, lobbying. We've advised on the issues related to the registration of the interests and asset declarations, and this is very important. And moreover, if the assets increase dramatically over the time in office, this can promote questions as to whether the increase in wealth is due to improper conduct, and the data collected in the registers should be permanently monitored by the parliament itself or by the relevant bodies. And as soon as such instances are revealed, there is a standard, there are international well-established standards which allow to shift the burden of proof on those individuals who should prove the legality of the sources and of the assets. In this respect is, of course, the work of the case law. There is quite a substantive case law of the international courts, including the European Court of Human Rights, which provides for certain standards in the process of the confiscation of property, which is linked to the serious criminal offenses such as corruption or money laundering, as well as providing the lawful, establishing the requirement to provide the lawful origin of the property, and so on and so forth. So again, not to take too much of the time, I will conclude by saying that in order for those institutions to operate, there is also the need for existence of the independent judicial institutions, prosecutorial offices, which were referred here during the previous speeches. And in that respect, the audit also supports the work of such institutions. And I want to mention just one example of the work, and it's the monitoring process of the appointment of judges and members of the independent judicial bodies or prosecutorial bodies, evaluating, assessing the credibility of the transparency of the process, and also making sure that there is all the international standards are applied in practice. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Constantine, for really discussing the importance of the work ODIHR is doing, but again, the different ways and resources you have for collaborating with national parliament. So again, having the benefit of his presence here, hopefully many of you will have discussions with him again on the margins about the ways ODIHR can cooperate with your national institutions. Our third speaker, and I should also mention again, if anyone would like to take the floor following our next presentation, please, of course, submit your name to the speaker's desk, I think, and we will form a list or queue. Our third speaker, I'm very excited to welcome, John Veruschi, who is here from Transparency International from the Secretariat in Berlin, will provide us a perspective from civil society, looking at the way in which public can serve that watchdog function of looking at the ways in which parliaments are or are not keeping up with their commitments to prevent corruption. So John, you have it down. You knew which podium to go to. So thank you so much again. 12 minutes, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Anita. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Madam President, Madam Vice President, first of all, let me start by thanking the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and in particular Ms. Irini Haralambidis, for the kind invitation. It's really great to be here. And also thanks to the House of Representatives and Madam President for the great welcome and very warm welcome we've all received here. The cooperation and partnership between the OSCE and Transparency International is a key one for us. So I'm very pleased to be here and address you all. I was asked to focus my intervention on what the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and OSCE member states can do to ensure effectiveness of anti-corruption measures. So I will do that. And I think, being the outsider, as some other people in this panel might be, we have the benefit of trying to offer you opportunities for engagement, or to offer each other opportunities for engagement. So throughout my intervention, I will make some points, and then I will follow up with concrete ways in which we can interact together, and maybe concrete ways in which we can work together. Transparency International has presence in 113 countries, and indeed in most of the 57 OSCE member states. So I hope that we'll be able to take up a lot of these opportunities. So first of all, I'll start with, so I'll have three key messages. First, transparency of anti-corruption data sets, and this has already been mentioned. Secondly, empowering oversight and supervision agencies. And thirdly, supporting media and civil society. So let me start from the top. Transparency of open data for anti-corruption. data on political finance, public procurement, company ownership, and so on are crucial to shed a light on corruption and integrity risks. And as we are an evidence-based advocacy organization, I have come to you today with some new research that I'd like to share. So together with the Global Data Barometer and the Open Government Partnership, we looked at the quality of political integrity data sets in 109 countries around the world. Of the 57 OEC members, we have managed to assess 35 of them. And I want to zoom in on three important government data sources: asset and interest declarations, political finance, and lobbying records. These data sets are all key if we want to shine a light on the intersection of private and public interests. So let me start with asset and interest declarations. Of the 35 OSCE countries assessed, 33 of them have regulations requiring collection or publication of this data. So far, so good. However, only 25 of them make this data available online. And even worse, only 5 out of the 25 do so in machine-readable formats, like, for example, a digital table in Excel. Now, ultimately, if the data is not machine-readable, but in handwritten and badly scanned PDFs, we cannot do much with them. So for all intents and purposes, only 5 countries out of 35 are somewhat close to what we need for effective control of corruption when it comes to asset and interest declarations. And when we look at the governance of this information, we can see why this availability is so poor. Out of the 35 countries that we assessed, only 22 of them have a specific agency which is empowered to collect and publish the data, and less than half, only 14, have a verification mechanism in place. Now, if you don't have a verification mechanism in place, it means anyone can just send anything and you're updating and publishing things that no one has even checked. So how can you even exercise accountability without verification? And still only 14 countries have this mechanism. When it comes to political finance, the situation is only marginally better. Out of the 35 countries assessed, 34 of them have the laws, again, good. However, only 28 of them make this data available online, and only 9 in machine-readable formats. Same with asset and interest declarations. Without machine-readable data, it is very difficult indeed to exercise any real accountability. When it comes to the governance of this data, 23 countries have an empowered agency to collect this information, but only 19 have a verification mechanism. So we see, again, this issue of governance as well as availability. And finally, the biggest shortcomings are in lobbying data. Of the 35 countries, 21 did not have any laws, policies, or regulations requiring collection or publication of this information in any form. In 8 countries, laws are being drafted or not yet implemented, and only in 6 countries do they exist and are operational. Other key data sets that need to be made operational, public, and disclosed in machine-readable formats as soon as possible include beneficial ownership registers and real estate data. For both beneficial ownership and real estate data, it is key that the relevant institutions also have the mandate and capacity to verify the data and sanction non-compliance. A report that we published last year found that even among EU member states, most countries are lagging behind in their commitments to establish beneficial ownership registers. So OSCE states should urgently prioritize the publication of these key data sets if they truly want to make a difference in the fight against corruption. Last year, TI and ODIHR organized a bootcamp on political integrity risk indicators, and I'm very pleased to share with you today that since that event, we have received some funding from the European Union to start filling these data gaps in 16 EU countries. We are now looking to expand this into the Western Balkans region, but we would very much welcome expanding this work further in the OSCE states, and would be delighted to work together with colleagues here and beyond to make data open by default a reality across the region. So let's discuss again on the margins, let's discuss and see how we can make open data for anti-corruption a reality in your countries as well. My second message is on empowering oversight and supervision agencies. And since this is the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and most colleagues in this room are members of Parliament, I should take the opportunity to emphasize the importance of parliamentary oversight. Parliamentary scrutiny and inquiries provide the key opportunity, particularly for opposition MPs, to hold governments to account. The financial oversight and budget approval is another great opportunity for parliaments to ask tough questions and search for inconsistencies. At Transparency International, we have developed a methodology to assess parliamentary oversight and support MPs to improve the process based on international best practice. This assessment methodology will be rolled out in 24 countries around the world, including at the moment 2 OSCE member states, but it's set to expand even further. And we would love to work with the Parliamentary Assembly and with individual MPs on rolling this methodology out across OSCE region member states. Beyond parliamentary oversight, independent supervision agencies are also key to ensure effective control of corruption. And we're lucky to hear from some of them today. But I would also like to talk a little bit about the international level. So international institutions also need to have their own integrity mechanisms. This also applies to this very body, the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE. As past lessons from the sister institution, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, have shown, integrity mechanisms are key to ensuring good conduct. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, with the anti-corruption leadership of Ms. Vardez, and other colleagues should prioritize setting up such a mechanism to ensure that all activities of the Assembly itself are shielded from undue influence. These mechanisms should cover all aspects of the work, from election monitoring to drafting of voting resolutions, standard setting activities, and so on. And I know that Ms. Vardez is working on codes of conduct, and really congratulate that effort, which would be a great start to pave the way for the establishment of a functioning integrity mechanism. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and the OSCE more broadly can also act as a united bloc in supporting the establishment of an effective international anti-corruption enforcement framework. Whether this looks like an international court or a coordinating body between national authorities or any other innovative form, the OSCE with its diverse membership and legal expertise should be at the forefront of such discussions. Other challenges that require international cooperation and coordination include dealing with the role of cryptocurrencies, the regulation of political ads online, as well as the more traditional topic of mutual legal assistance between states in transnational corruption cases. And I think the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly is really very well placed to deal with these issues. And lastly, my third message, but by no means least important, we need the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and OSCE states to support and empower media, civil society, and whistleblowers across the 57 states. As politicians, you can lend legitimacy to activists and the media. They, or rather we, are a key part of what makes pluralistic societies. The first thing that you can do as politicians is to promote a culture of inclusion and openness towards actors in the media and civic space. Give our colleagues at the national level the same space that you give us at the international level, and work together with them like you work together with us. However, culture change needs to be matched with legislation, with legal protections. The issue of strategic lawsuits against public participation, otherwise known as SLAPs, has received increasingly more attention in recent years. And there are some good examples in the US and in Canada where provincial and state level legislation has been passed to ensure that public interest stories and campaigns are not shut down through legal intimidation. Similarly, OSCE states can look at the EU Whistleblower Protection Directive and adapt it in their own context. I know that here in Cyprus, for example, you have spearheaded such efforts at the national context. The OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and other institutions can support member states with technical assistance, for example, here. We as Transparency International, our chapters, would also be more than happy to work with you to get the best legislation on whistleblower protection possible. Other measures can include passing a specific resolution by the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly on shrinking civic space and press freedom that would send the right message across the OSCE region. Again, we'd be very happy to support the Assembly and member states in such efforts. So in conclusion, let's work together to make open data a reality, strengthen oversight institutions, and protect civic space and media. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. And it was interesting that you mentioned, of course, open data for anti-corruption, but as you're saying, I think it's effective open data, right? Not just any data. So thank you all for discussing these range of tools, and I hope for each of our three speakers that they will provide links and resources to all of the different information that they've discussed today as part of their presentations. And Robbie mentioned that during the question and answer, if there's more questions or interest in the role of the World Bank and technical cooperation, he's happy to answer questions. So the floor is now open for interventions. So again, I have the speakers list here. Is it still open? So if there are additional individuals who want to take the floor, please do provide your name. We'll begin now, and of course, 3 minutes for everybody, please. We first have Khalid Hatime from Morocco, followed by Radu Mihai Mihail from Romania. So Khalid, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est avec un grand plaisir que nous prenons part à cette conférence et qu'il me soit permis, en mon nom propre et en celui des membres de la délégation marocaine ici présente, d'adresser mes remerciements aux autorités chypriotes pour l'organisation de cette rencontre et pour leur chaleureux accueil. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, phénomène global touchant tous les pays, la corruption est une entrave au bon fonctionnement des institutions démocratiques et au développement économique et social. Conscient des grands risques du fléau de la corruption et de ses répercussions négatives à tous les niveaux, le Royaume du Maroc, conformément à la vision pertinente de Sa Majesté le roi Mohamed VI, a placé les efforts de lutte contre la corruption à la tête des priorités de ces grandes réformes. À ce titre, le Parlement marocain a adopté un ensemble de lois ambitieuses visant à renforcer les valeurs d'intégrité et de transparence, notamment la loi relative à la protection des témoins de la corruption, la loi relative au droit d'accès à l'information, la loi instituant une déclaration obligatoire de patrimoine de certains élus, des conseils locaux et de certaines catégories de fonctionnaires, et la loi relative à la liberté de la presse. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, ayant ratifié en 2007 la Convention des Nations Unies contre la corruption, le Maroc participe activement à toutes les sessions de la conférence des États parties à la Convention, a également organisé la 4e session qui fut marquée par l'adoption de la déclaration de Marrakech pour la lutte contre la corruption. Le Maroc déploie également des efforts pour lutter contre ce fléau au niveau régional. Elle a ratifié la Convention arabe pour la lutte contre la corruption et prend une part active aux activités du réseau arabe pour la réforme et l'intégrité de la lutte contre la corruption. De même, la Constitution marocaine de 2011 consacre tout un titre à la bonne gouvernance, où plusieurs principes de droits fondamentaux ont ainsi été constitutionnalisés, à savoir le droit d'accès à l'information, le droit de pétition, ainsi que la liberté de la presse. Le Maroc a procédé à la numérisation des services fournis par l'administration, au lancement d'un portail dédié à la réception des plaintes des citoyens et d'une ligne téléphonique dédiée à la réception des dénonciations d'actes de corruption, ainsi qu'à l'organisation de formations sur la déontologie de lutte contre la corruption au profit des fonctionnaires. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais conclure mon intervention en soulignant l'importance que revêt la corruption internationale en faveur de la prévention et de la lutte contre la corruption. En effet, la stratégie nationale de lutte contre la corruption peut tirer grand profit de la coopération internationale entre parlementaires, notamment par l'échange des expériences et meilleures pratiques en la matière. À cet égard, notre délégation estime que l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE offre un cadre idoine pour le dialogue, la coopération, l'échange d'informations et le partage de bonnes pratiques aux fins de prévention de la lutte contre la corruption. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Monsieur Ratimi. Our next speaker, we have Radu Mihai Mihail from Romania, and then we have Johannes Koskinen from Finland.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, many thanks to Irene and to all our generous hosts from the Cyprus Parliament for this excellent initiative and organization of this event on such an essential topic for all our societies. When we discussed with our President, Margareta Sederfeld, about the opportunity to relaunch the activity of the Special Representative for Digital Agenda of the OSCE-PA, one element we envisaged investigating has been the impact of digitalization on fighting corruption. The work we started since Madam Søderfeldt decided to appoint me in this position, the interactions so far we had in Denmark, in Romania, here in Cyprus, confirmed the clear link between the two. Digitalization can help shake up or eliminate practices that enable corruption. One rationale behind this negative correlation is that digitalization helps corruption prevention. It brings a more agile way of doing things, cuts through red tape, ensures transparency of information flows, and transparency has been a continuous underlined point in the interventions today. But digitalization also supports anti-corruption investigation activities through availability of advanced data analytics and other forensic support tools. In Romania, for example, an essential impact in reducing the level of corruption came from legislation imposing that large portions of acquisition processes in the public sector should be conducted via online auctions. Unfortunately, no public policy can bring permanent guarantees. For example, the coronavirus crisis brought us both positive and negative evolutions. The restrictions brought by the pandemic imposed a much larger degree of digital interaction with the administration at local and central level, so that citizens and enterprises have been subjected to less instances when public officials could have exerted pressure and could have suggested the bribery is needed. But on the other hand, as the crisis imposed quick changes of legislation, some politicians and public officials exploited this pretext to introduce and use exceptions to standard acquisition practices, increasing substantially the misbehavior probability, especially in the context of public procurement of medical resources. In conclusion, the point I would raise as essential is that we need to ensure that the benefits of accelerated digitalization are supported by solid, difficultly reversible public policies meant to reinvent governments and public administration's behavior. The smarter use of new technologies can propel the fight against corruption to a new level of efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the first two speakers, not only for their substantive comments, but for keeping to the time. I will now go to Johannes from Finland, and then we have, after that, Hadil Snopti from North Macedonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Prevention and combating of corruption require extensive cooperation between various parties. The well-functioning democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, free media are, of course, cornerstones to this work. Finland has no separate anti-corruption agency, but several different authorities and other bodies are jointly responsible for the work against corruption. We acknowledge that in many countries, the special organs and prosecutors are needed to strengthen the anti-corruption policies and work. But in our case, this model has been quite efficient for about 20 years already. The Anti-Corruption Cooperation Network is the local anti-corruption body in Finland as required by many international conventions. I was Minister of Justice when it was started 20 years ago. The members of the network represent the relevant ministries, the police, the prosecution service, business and industry, and non-governmental organizations like Transparency International, its chapter in Finland. The network promotes intersectoral cooperation against corruption. The prosecution service operates in the administrative branch of the Ministry of Justice, but independently, prosecutors are responsible for the enforcement of criminal liability in corruption offenses. The police carries out criminal intelligence gathering and investigations to expose corruption and submit corruption cases to prosecutors. And this work is part of the prevention of economic crime and grey economy especially. Inside the police, the Financial Intelligence Unit, working under the auspices of the National Bureau of Investigation, receives reports on suspicious transactions and financing of terrorism. By analyzing these reports, it's possible to expose cash flows and transactions that may have connections to corruption and also money laundering. The Ministry of Finance participates in the anti-corruption work by drawing attention to ethicality and values within the state administration. The Ministry of Finance issues guidelines to public officials and is responsible for developing the legislation governing public officials. The tax administration collects the majority of taxes and tax-like charges in Finland. Its responsibilities also include tax supervision, and staff is trained to detect corruption. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has started special activities. It monitors development cooperation and supports Finland's partner countries in combating corruption. The ministry provides training to both its own staff and its partners on the prevention and combating of corruption. And lately, we have started an e-service for reporting suspicions of misuse of Finnish development cooperation funds. And of course, we have the Parliamentary Ombudsman and the Chancellor of Justice doing the supervision of the whole of public sector. Thank you.
Thank you again, and thank you for your remarks, and also for keeping time. We next turn to Hadliosnopci, North Macedonia, and then we have Malik Benachour from Belgium afterwards.
Thank you, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. There are too many people in this room who have the power to change the things, said Ms. Irena Haralambidis in her opening speech. The main question is, are we doing enough? Or saying more simply, do we use our power in an appropriate way to change the situation? The topic here that we can read from here is combating corruption, defending democracy. So I'm reading there, defending democracy. Democracy in North Macedonia celebrates 32 years of its existence. The communism lived 45 years. Usually, the communism was accused for the regression in the economy and in the entire society. But what can we say now? After 32 years in democracy, we still cannot have economic progress, our lives are even worse, and our state is one of the less developed states in Europe. When one takes into the consideration this simple conclusion, then a simple question which appears as the consequence of this conclusion is, was life in communism better than in democracy? Of course, the answer is no, but we must accept the fact that the democracy has failed. The main reason why democracy has failed is that the political leaders and the political parties have misunderstood democracy and the capitalism. Democracy is misunderstood because they think that in democracy the statement, the winner takes everything, is a true statement. The true in the sense that the parties who have the majority and who lead with the state or with the government can elect. For example, they think that can elect the members of the court, prosecutors, to control the media, to lead with the hospitals, schools, etc. The capitalism, in the other side, is misunderstood because of its three elements: privatization, concurrency, competition for money. By corruption and absence of rule of law, the three elements are on the top of interest, and as the consequence, the usurpation of social goods is on a very big level. By this mentality, the entire social system is decayed. As a consequence, it's very difficult to repair these decayed systems. It's impossible to be done by just one political party or by some individuals who have a very strong will. It is impossible to be repaired even by the international community. To repair this system, the emancipation of all community is needed, and unfortunately, it lost a lot of years. And of course, the joke that Mr. Robi Senderovic said to us at the beginning of his speech, more or less is true. So it's about mentality. It's the main reason. So when the state is corrupted, it means there are different forms of corruption. Therefore, I am saying that this kind of corruption has all forms. It starts as the institutional treason, but later it is transformed into the national treason. Why? Because by corrupting, they actually want to protect themselves. And by protecting themselves, they betray the nation by anti-national decisions. Therefore, we must emphasize that the democracy has entered in a big crisis last years. This is due to the fact that, unfortunately, we have not installed genuine system of democracy. Why? Because of big level of corruption. Until the corruption is on that level, we cannot speak for installing the real value of democracy. It needs a big effort and, of course, a real will of responsible people. So not just words, but the real will and courage to implement the words that we are saying. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Mr. Benachour, and then following that, we have Mr. El Walid Lagoun from Algeria. So, Mr. Benachour.
Merci. Merci, Madame la Présidente, mes chers collègues participants à cette conférence. L'Algérie se félicite d'être partenaire au sein de l'OSCE.
I'm sorry, Monsieur. First, we have a speaker from Belgium, and then you. Vous êtes le deuxième. Merci.
Merci. Bien, je voudrais commencer en remerciant évidemment les autorités chypriotes pour la qualité de leur accueil. Alors, nous sommes dans un débat parlementaire et je considère que la valeur d'un débat parlementaire dépend de notre capacité à échanger entre nous avec honnêteté et franchise. Alors, chers collègues, aujourd'hui, quelles sont les menaces qui pèsent sur le combat contre la corruption? Alors, il y a évidemment la corruption elle-même, mais il y a aussi toute une série de phénomènes qui nuisent à la crédibilité de la lutte contre la corruption qui, je le rappelle, est un enjeu majeur pour l'avenir des institutions démocratiques. Et parmi ces phénomènes, je vais en citer 3. 1, les logiques de double standard. 2, le manque de réciprocité dans l'implémentation des dispositifs anticorruption au niveau international. Et 3, l'instrumentalisation des lois anticorruption au profit de logiques économiques qui n'ont rien à voir avec les enjeux de la lutte contre la corruption. Permettez-moi, chers collègues, de livrer à votre réflexion 2 exemples qui illustrent à mes yeux ces menaces. Premier exemple, l'extraterritorialité de certaines législations prises dans des pays tiers qui rendent de facto applicables partout dans le monde des législations qui sont prises dans un seul pays. Alors, au-delà du fait que l'extraterritorialité des lois sape la crédibilité du droit international, je m'interroge sur l'usage qui en est parfois fait. Et pour rappel, des milliards de dollars d'amendes ont été payés, par exemple, au Trésor américain par des entreprises européennes avec pour résultat le fait de favoriser des entreprises américaines concurrentes sur le marché international. Il y a donc là une instrumentalisation de dispositifs de lutte contre la corruption au profit de logiques économiques contraires à la libre concurrence. Il y a une littérature très intéressante sur le sujet de l'extraterritorialité et un rapport qui a été remis, je pense, en 2019 au Premier ministre français à l'époque. Deuxième exemple que je voudrais soumettre à votre réflexion, chers collègues, nous sommes ici à Chypre, à quelques dizaines de kilomètres d'un pays, le Liban, qui a fait de la corruption un système. Ce système a provoqué la ruine de tout le pays et a jeté la majorité de la population dans la pauvreté en provoquant la pire crise économique au monde depuis 1850, et c'est la Banque mondiale qui le dit. Eh bien, les architectes de ce système de corruption sont toujours en place aujourd'hui, malgré la révolte du peuple libanais, malgré l'explosion du port de Beyrouth, malgré tout. Les architectes de ce système continuent de sévir parce qu'ils sont protégés par des gouvernements tiers qui ont un intérêt politique à les protéger, mais qui, dans d'autres lieux et dans d'autres circonstances, affichent pourtant leur ambition contre la corruption. Chers collègues, la lutte contre la corruption, comme la démocratie d'ailleurs, ne peut survivre à des logiques de double standard qui ruinent sa crédibilité. La lutte contre la corruption, elle a besoin de lois, elle a besoin de règles, elle a besoin de sanctions, elle a aussi besoin de cohérence, de constance et de crédibilité. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Now, Monsieur Lagoun, the floor is yours, and then we will follow with Ms. Lucy Potukova from the Czech Republic. Monsieur Lagoun.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, mes chers collègues participants à cette conférence. Je disais que l'Algérie se félicitait d'être partenaire de l'OSCE, qu'elle suit les travaux avec un intérêt toujours plus croissant, considérant que cette organisation constitue un cadre pertinent de concertation et de coopération en la matière, étant entendu qu'il ne peut pas y avoir de politique publique nationale stricte sans une coopération internationale face j'allais dire, à la mondialisation du phénomène de la corruption qui appelle une riposte internationale. Donc la question de la lutte contre la corruption est une question extrêmement sensible dans mon pays, compte tenu du fait que tout l'effort de développement s'effectue grâce à des financements publics qui soient tirés des ressources naturelles ou de la contribution des contribuables. D'ailleurs, la revendication de la lutte contre la corruption a toujours été au cœur des revendications de la société civile, mais également elle a été inscrite dans les différents programmes gouvernementaux, notamment depuis la promulgation de la loi 2006 relative à la lutte contre la corruption, suite à l'adhésion de l'Algérie et à la ratification des différentes conventions internationales que vous connaissez toutes, celles de l'ONU, africaine et arabe. Mais c'est surtout à partir de l'année 2019 qu'un vaste programme de lutte contre la corruption a été engagé et inauguré par la révision de la Constitution, dont l'axe principal de la révision a été celui relatif à la lutte contre la corruption, que ce soit dans le projet lui-même ou dans les débats publics autour du projet. Cela a abouti à accorder un statut constitutionnel à l'organe de prévention de la lutte contre la corruption, qui est une autorité indépendante et dont les attributions sont exclusivement définies par la loi. Donc, en application de la Constitution, un vaste programme de révision des textes législatifs et réglementaires a été effectué, d'ailleurs sur la base de la définition que donne Transparency International relative à la corruption, c'est-à-dire le monopole moins la transparence égale corruption, et donc c'est dans cet esprit de démonopolisation et d'accorder plus de transparence que tout ce programme est mis en œuvre. Bien sûr, je ne vais pas citer tout ce qui a été entrepris, mais il est quand même tout à fait intéressant de voir quelques volets. D'abord un volet politique, parce qu'il y a du politique dans la corruption et qu'il est vain de vouloir isoler le volet politique du volet économique de la corruption, comme cela vient d'être relevé de manière assez pertinente. Donc la loi électorale a été révisée, surtout dans son mode de scrutin, qui a été un mode de scrutin fermé et hiérarchisé à la faveur d'un mode de scrutin ouvert et qui ne laisse plus de place à l'achat des postes et à l'argent sale dans le processus électoral. Le domaine des marchés publics, vous le connaissez tous, qui appelle toujours, qui est un terreau favorable à la corruption, ou d'ailleurs, dans cet effort d'investissement et de développement, les multinationales sont présentes, qui sont aussi un facteur d'encouragement et de source aussi de corruption. La loi relative à l'investissement, bien évidemment, et qui limite l'ensemble des pouvoirs de l'administration, qui accorde maintenant et dorénavant des délais pour répondre aux demandes des investisseurs, les déclarations de patrimoine, enfin, toute la panoplie de mesures qui sont liées à la lutte contre la corruption. Bien évidemment, ce n'est pas suffisant de mettre des textes, il y a des actions concrètes à mener, elles sont menées aujourd'hui, et beaucoup de poursuites sont engagées au moment même où je vous parle. Il y a des procès qui se tiennent contre des individus qui ont été impliqués dans des affaires de corruption. Bref, l'expérience algérienne aussi a révélé que la lutte contre la corruption a été aussi menée dans le même temps contre le blanchiment d'argent, contre la lutte contre le terrorisme et toutes ces, bien sûr, interactions entre terrorisme, corruption, argent sale sont maintenant patentes et évidentes. Donc, c'est dans cet esprit que l'ensemble des programmes de lutte contre la corruption sont élaborés. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Our last two speakers, we have Lucy Potukova from the Czech Republic, and then finally we have Miki Zohar from Israel. Is there anyone else who has asked for the floor? Looking back to the speaker's desk? No? All right. Lucy?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my name is Lucia Potuchkova, and I feel very honored to be here, and I want to express my thanks to all organizers for preparing this enormously important event. Now let me explain how the Czech Republic contributes to fighting corruption and what we see as our common priorities. The Czech government has committed itself to tackle all forms of corruption and to adopt an ambitious approach in implementing effective anti-corruption measures. We have a governmental strategy which relies on 4 pillars: an effective and independent executive power, transparent and open access to data, an efficient and economical treatment of the state property, and last but not least, we need to be aware of how important is the education and development of civil society and its motivation to demand such an approach from their governments. Of course, the role of media and journalists as watchdogs of this process is absolutely irreplaceable. And I must say that we are listening carefully to all NGOs involved in the search for the best mechanism against corruption practices. Obviously, not all the goals were met, and we are now obliged by the European Commission to adopt important pieces of the missing legislation to be able to get our allocation of funding. We need to adopt a law on prevention of conflict of interest, a law on beneficial owners, and also a law that would regulate lobbying. This is not an easy thing to do because every law, every regulation is subject to long political discussion, and sometimes finding consensus can be a hard nut to crack in the political arena. I guess you all know it pretty well. I am aware that different governments may have various approaches how to tackle corruption, but for me, the EU provides a guarantee that if a member state wants to receive financial allocations, the given member state needs to comply with the agreed sets of rules. As for the future prospects of EU as a guarantor of the anti-corruption policies, the Czech government will support an EU membership of Ukraine when the senseless and unprovoked Russian aggression in Ukraine ends. I know it's a little bit out of the topic, but I should know that in the last 3 months, the Czech Republic accepted more than 350,000 of refugees of war from Ukraine, which makes nearly 3.5% of our population. We are handling this problem, and we are handling it well, hand in hand with our dear neighbors, Slovakia and Poland, and of course in close cooperation with all Baltic states. Nevertheless, without any doubt, there will be a huge funding and many contracts for rebuilding the infrastructure in Ukraine after the war. It will also mean that we will need a robust anti-corruption oversight system in place. All stakeholders will benefit from such anti-corruption measures, and above all, rebuilding strong Ukraine without corruption will be most beneficial for the Ukrainians themselves. At the end of my intervention, I would like to stress out what Nuhu Ribadu, the former executive chairman of Nigeria Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, testified before the US House of Representatives. When you fight corruption, it fights back. It will likely have greater resources than you, and it is led by those who operate outside the law and view the fight as life and death for their survival. And as much as fighting corruption can sometimes be a Sisyphean task, it's crucial for our democracy, especially in the time of crisis, because at the end of the day, the corruption of the powerful ends up being paid for by the poor. It's paid by hospitals without medicine, by patients without treatment, and by children without education. Thank you for your patience and attention.
Thank you so much. And our last speaker, Mr. Zahar.
Yes, hi, thank you. I would like to start by thanking the Parliament of Cyprus and the OSCE for hosting this important meeting. I think the number of the people in this room is the proof that the importance of this issue to all of us. And I will be brief because I'm the last one. So I think the big discussion could be, what is corruption? What will be the difference between corruption and crime? And I think one thing is almost sure for everyone is that we must fight corruption together, and we can do that. We are coming from the Israeli parliament, and we know that there is two important players to fight corruption. One, free and independent press. Two, free and independent justice system. This is, in our opinion, is the most important aspects of fighting corruption. In Israel, the media is totally free, and this has a strong effect on fighting corruption. That is also when we talk about our justice system. Israel could be a great example of how a democracy can defend itself from corruption with strong and free media and justice system. In order to keep this independence of the of these entities, every parliament must secure it by means of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll just, for very quick interventions, turn back to our panel, and let me just say, if you could give one recommendation of your many, what is something that you think is a top priority for these different national parliaments? And the second piece is, what is one way in which you would advise the different parliaments to cooperate with your institution? So with that, Robbie, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to get back to you. So very quickly, so we can move to the other panelists as well, and thank you for moderating the session as well. For us, it's very important, this agenda. In 1995, for me, it's like it was yesterday, but it was 1995, 30 years ago, the president of the World Bank, Jim Wolfensohn, said corruption is the cancer of societies. It was not easy for the World Bank to say that. We refer to corruption as the C word. We didn't say corruption because it was too political. We will say that has nothing to do with us. We are a development institution. Finally, we understood corruption hampers development. And because corruption doesn't allow countries to develop, we said, let's work on this, let's work on this frontally. We do work together with parliaments, so we are at your disposal to share information. In some countries, like Romania here represented today, we continue to lend money so we can put resources at your disposal. We also have grants for civil society organizations. We work with them to solve problems. I always remember in one country we work on, the problem was not to take the kids to school. Finally, we got the kids to school, but the teachers were not in school. And when the Minister of Education saw who is in school every day, the official reports will say that every teacher was in school every day. It was only through parents' associations that you could know exactly which teacher was where and when. And by doing that, not only empowering students, solving a problem, but empowering the Minister of Education. So when she needed to talk to the teachers' union, she will have the information on the table. So this is the type of thing that we can do together with you. This is very important. To conclude, and not to repeat the credo that we had today, I am not so sure that citizens care about corruption. I am not so sure that your constituents, your voters, care about corruption. I think that they care about corruption when things don't go well in their countries. But when things go well, what they say, I heard that myself. Every politician is corrupt. It doesn't matter who's in power. All of them will steal. At least they deliver something for us. So it's about delivery. So we need to put these two agendas together. If we can show citizens that when corruption exists, the delivery doesn't happen, you will have more people supporting your cause. Otherwise, people don't care. As long as there is a delivery, they will say, okay, it's a necessary cost in society. And I have a question to give you the word, maybe, at this point, Constantine, which is, you made the relationship between democracy and corruption. And you said basically that corruption has an impact on democracy, and when there is corruption, democracy suffers. That there is also an impact of democracy on corruption, right? So less democratic regions have more chances for corruption. So what is it? And this is not just semantics. It's important for us because then we need to define whether we work on democracy and we help democratic institutions be stronger, and through that you reduce corruption, or you work on reducing corruption because you hope that by reducing corruption you're going to have stronger democracies in the country. And it's very important. It's not a semantic question because that defines the strategies that our organizations have.
Thank you so much. And this really is about strategies. Where do you begin and what should you prioritize? So Constantine, your recommendations.
Well, I'm not sure I'm ready to answer all the questions in a satisfactory way.
You can do it this evening over dinner as well.
Walk out of this room saying that we have an answer to everything, but I'll try. I think it's I think it was Ms. Irene and Harold Midis who mentioned that there is what is important here is a political will. And I think what we need to, and that's probably what is the key in fighting the corruption. If we all agree in the society, we agree with respect to the certain rules of the game, and we start to follow those rules seriously, then I think then each of us who would start to kind of play fault, that they will be held into account. Just to give an example of just imagine, I don't know how many love and follow the football, but imagine that we have a referee who is corrupt, and we all know that he is corrupt, right? What sense it makes to play the game? Or if you play, then it's a question how much you pay, right? So it increases the cost, and finally, of course, that reflects on our society. So everything becomes more difficult and even more expensive. I think that's important for us, to all of us, for our societies, for individual of the society, for every individual, understand that we are part of the same. We agreed about the rules and we just follow them, and because of that we need impartial and effective arbiters, right? Referees. We have to invest in that, and unfortunately, what I don't see is that states are seriously investing into that, into creating the strong, independent institutions which could act as a referees in the football game, to be both protected, be independent, and be professional. And that requires a lot of investment, and it's kind of a secondary in many places. And unless we change that, I don't think we will be really able to achieve the progress. And finally, the question was what we advise, how we should, from the point of view of audit, what I would advise to engage. I think many countries have in place the system which implies the kind of certain impact assessment, of regulatory impact assessment of some way. So the parliaments are looking how the laws are operating. And I think whenever, including the code of conduct or any other legislation, anti-corruption legislation, which we put in place, and sometimes it's a decision as a result of the very difficult political consensus, and it's success already to have something, but with some time, I think it is very important to review that and to see to what extent that mechanisms really work, and to provide a possibility maybe to invite impartial auditors from outside. That's where I would see the benefit of international players like ODIHR or maybe others as well, to give them a chance to review and provide recommendations and see what works well and what does not work well, and then give again chance to the authorities to reflect on that. I'll stop here.
Great. Thank you so much, Constantine. And John, the last word to you. And John was saying that he's been taking notes on how many times the Transparency International Corruption Perceptions Index and TI have been mentioned today, many. So people are using your work. But John, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Anita. In terms of the major recommendation that I'd like to leave you with today is, we've been talking a lot about political will. We started this morning talking about political will. We've been talking about it all day. But the issue is that political will needs things to make it happen. Like political will needs pressure to make it happen. And where does this pressure come from? It comes from society, it comes from media, it comes from civil society, it comes from anyone who stands to lose from the current status quo, anyone who stands to lose from corruption. So it's a bit of a difficult situation where you're trying to foster that political will, but then you're not giving the tools to civil society, to media, to other actors that could potentially act as guardians of accountability. It doesn't suffice to have political will among 5 people, 20 people, even a big group of members of it. That will never achieve the results of societal political will. To get societal political will, we need open data. We need all of these data sets around who funds political parties, what assets and interests you have, company registers, beneficial ownership transparency. All of this data enables us from civil society, journalists, everyday citizens, even your own enforcement institutions, even parliamentary committees, to be able to generate that political will. So if I leave you with one major recommendation is, please prioritize opening up key anti-corruption data sets. It's not the end of it. You still need to create the circumstances under which people can use this data. But the first step, you know, we're really, really behind with this. When, if anyone said that, oh, this is a matter of cost, like we don't have money to do it, or it's a matter of resources. You know, imagine if someone said, we don't have resources to publish aviation data. All planes would start crashing. People want to publish aviation data to avoid planes from crashing. We should also publish political integrity data to avoid democracies from crashing, to avoid our systems from crashing. And in terms of what TI can do, I would say, to connect it with my first point, we can help you generate that political will if you cooperate with us, if you give us the tools and the opportunities and the space. So with that, I want to end that we're very much in all of our 113 country offices looking forward to working with you and your colleagues to foster that political will.
Anita, can I ask him a question?
I will look to our hosts. Is there time for this question? So I think that means, is that a yes or is that a no? I think it's that we need to conclude, yes? Yeah, so I think, yes. I think we'll...
Two more minutes, yeah? Okay.
You need to ask questions?
He wants to ask a question of John.
Oh, yes, of
so the
course
dialogue is now beginning.
For goodness sake, transparency,
Go
freedom
ahead.
of speech, you can say whatever you like.
Thank you, Arid. So, John, I have a question for you because I cannot agree more with you about the need, but also the possibility that political will can be built. Many times we talk to colleagues and they tell you what Constantine is saying is not possible in my country because there is no political will. Okay? I think it can be built. To what extent IT is working with international credit rating agencies? Because governments may not listen to their citizens. Sometimes they don't listen to their own parliaments. Sometimes they don't listen to international organizations. They always listen to the markets. And international credit agencies are the ones who define how risky is a country for an investment. All ministers of finance, every day, they check the credit rating they have because if they want to issue a new bond, new debt, that defines how much they need to pay for that. So, to what extent you guys try to influence international credit agencies so the price of corruption becomes a real price for ministers of finance?
Thanks a lot for that, Robbie. I mean, we, of course, work with rating agencies insofar as we make our data available for everyone. So everyone can, it's open license, everyone can use the Corruption Perceptions Index, everyone can use the Global Corruption Barometer and all of our data. But actually, I think you've only mentioned one of the many avenues of building political will. So, you know, this is, as you said earlier over lunch, it's about conducting a political economy analysis, understanding really where the problem lies, the context-specific issue, where what allows corruption to happen in every sector, in every institution, in every... So in some countries it might not be due to, you know, the rating agencies or the markets. I personally believe that power should be with the people rather than with the markets. So whether people channel this power through other institutions, through other intermediaries, you know, that's another question that we can have. But I would conclude by saying that, yes, this political power can be fostered, also through financial institutions, but ultimately it's people that are driving that.
Questions, so I think we can give him the floor.
So, Roberto, what is your...
I have a question. I want to contribute to the debate on who fosters political will, because this is something that has you know, been going through my mind for many years, traveling with presidents and members of the Parliamentary Assembly, and always finding out that one problem could be fixed if there was political will. Of all the problems that we have in the OSCE, frozen conflicts, if there is political will, it will be solved. Now, who fosters the political will? If you just think of the last 12 months, we were Fridays for Future, you know, there was all this discussion about we have to transition to energy, and there is no political will. Then all of a sudden there's been political will after COVID. We have 750 billion in the EU, something unthought of.
and there is money to transition to have green energy. Now, everybody's saying, where can we find coal? Where can we find alternative source of energy? So there was political will for transition, but now it's not important anymore because we have to punish somebody else, so we have to find alternative sources of it. So where is the political will, and who determines the political will? Is the people, as you say? Is it the media? If today there is political will to solve some of the big issues that we have, there might be some people who will look at you and say, why do you want to solve it? Why do you want to use tools like dialogue or discussions to solve that big problems we have ahead of us? So who is the generator of the political will? And are we really free in our mind? Is it really the civil society, as you say, or the public opinion that determines? But I think for this we have to continue until tonight. I think everybody wants to go, but it's a very interesting debate.
It is, and I'll just say, so the words that we've heard more now in the afternoon is political will. Just to make you laugh, my children, my husband is also a professor. One day my daughter said, who is this political will? You keep mentioning this gentleman. Where is he? Where can we find him? So hopefully you'll find him this evening during our social event. If you find political will, please tell him to join us tomorrow, or her. But so political cost to political will. So again, thank you for waking us up and for a lively discussion this afternoon. Please join me in thanking our panel. And we also have to thank, and I have to apologize, I know I speak quickly, to our wonderful interpreters, so please join me in thanking them. And thank you so much to the Conference Secretariat for all of their excellent, excellent work today. This has been an excellent, well-run day, and we really appreciate your support. It's time to leave. So in terms of announcements, I think we're heading back to hotels for a short break before a guided tour to the ceasefire line in the old town of Nicosia, and then an official dinner. So we'll have a lovely evening ahead. I'm told to advise you to wear comfortable shoes for the guided visit, so make sure. And the third session starts tomorrow at 9 o'clock, so bright and early, as the sun will be up at 6 a.m. And the last is, please leave your headsets on the chair as you leave. So again, thank you all, and see you this evening.